Hello and welcome to my channel. Today's tragic tale takes place in Poughkeepsie, New York. Poughkeepsie is located in Dutchess County and sits on the banks of the Hudson River. Two bridges cross the river, a suspension bridge called Mid-Hudson Bridge and an old railroad bridge turned pedestrian bridge known as the world's longest elevated pedestrian bridge called Walkway over the Hudson. It was also home to 55-year-old Joann Nichols. Joann was a first-grade teacher at Gay Head Elementary School. Joann was on a break for the holidays and had a routine of getting her hair done every Saturday. Joann left her home on December 21st, 1985, and was never seen again. When her husband James came home, he found a note typed on the computer by his wife, a message on the answering machine that was from the hair salon saying Joann was late for her appointment. Joann's car was missing, so James reported her missing at 4:40 p.m. The following day, Joann's car was found at 9 Mall Shopping Center, but it was not near the hair salon. Police started their missing person investigation. They would not disclose what the typed note on the computer said. Her husband said Joann had been depressed off and on over the last 3 years since their only son drowned in Sardis Lake in northern Mississippi. Apparently he was riding on the hood of an amphicar, which is a floating car similar to this one, and he fell off. He was attending the University of Mississippi at the time of his death. Police interviewed family, friends, employees of the school, and members of the church where Joann and James were members, and turned up no leads. James told police he had heard from his wife on December 24th, but was unsure where the call came from, and his wife sounded okay. James said the call lasted only 30 seconds, and she told him to say hi to their 2 golden retrievers, and that she had a new name, was at peace with God, and not to look for her. James said when he asked Joann where she was, she hung up. January 3rd, 1986. Police were still investigating. James made a statement saying he has given everything he knows to the police and wanted to find his wife, and that he has been working with the police to find her. Police said Joann didn't appear to take any of her clothes or withdraw money from her bank account. James said Joann always kept half of her check and he didn't know what she did with it. Police had no reason to suspect Joann was anything more than a missing person. January 6, 1986. James was at a diner with a family friend and the reverend from his church and gave the following statement. There's no reason to assume she's dead or alive, joined a group, or run off with some other man. There are 1,000 possibilities. The pain is not knowing. He also said she may have just run away from the pressure of the holidays coming and that she was unable to cope since their only son died. The Reverend stated Joann was not the kind of person who would just run off by herself. He said she didn't travel on her own and depended on her husband. She never drove after dark. January 15, 1986. James made another statement saying that Joann was under the impression that she would no longer be teaching at the school after the holiday break, and that she had been asked to retire. When police questioned the principal and the school superintendent, they stated they did not ask Joann to retire and planned on her returning after the holiday. James was relentless in accusing the school of pushing his wife over the edge, saying they didn't want her around kids because they felt like she was trying to replace her dead son with the kids. The school stopped answering questions about Joann's disappearance and referred all calls to the school headquarters. A friend of Joann's, Ellen Johnson, said she consulted a psychic and that the psychic said that Joann was safe and living in the South and had driven by one person. James said he didn't ask Ellen to consult a psychic, but that was good news. He said Joann's mother and brother lived in Louisiana. Ellen Johnson and her husband had dinner with both James and Joann at the Ground Round restaurant the night before Joann disappeared. She said Joann wasn't very talkative, but didn't seem to be bothered by anything. Although later reports said the couple had been arguing, but the source of the information was not the person who had dinner with Joann and James, and said this decades later. It was probably a story that just got spun over the decades. The beginning of March, the police did borrow a helicopter and scanned Wappinger Creek to see if they would be able to spot Joann. It turned up nothing. March 4th, 1986. The police lieutenant told the papers they no longer were working full-time on Joann's disappearance. The lieutenant said since there is no body and no evidence of a crime, there is not much more they can do, and that all of their leads have dried up. He said if new tips came in, he would have someone follow up. However, the police still considered her missing. Her relatives in Shreveport, Louisiana have not heard from her. Joann called her mother every Sunday for the past 10 years and hadn't since her disappearance. Even if the police could not dedicate a full-time investigation into Joann's disappearance, the paper continued to keep publishing Joann's picture and all that had been made public so far, and the story was retold. 1 year after Joann's disappearance, the Poughkeepsie police detective and lieutenant reviewed files from Joann's case. They still had very few clues. James said he had been under scrutiny since his wife's disappearance and thought she was still alive and either joined a commune or ran off to New York City to become an actress. He said she idolized actress Helen Hayes. James also said he had lost friends over this, but also gained new ones, and that he had become involved with a female he had known for a long time. Apparently, after the investigators discovered the girlfriend, he voluntarily said they could come and search his house. That is what he claimed anyway. Police said they never searched the house because they didn't have a warrant. The only time they had been in the house was the day James reported her missing, and at that time they saw Joann's wedding ring and credit cards were on the dresser. James said that's where she left them. Joann's brother in Louisiana hired a private detective by this time and said any communes in the vicinity had been checked. The school still denied that they had asked Joann to retire. They stated she was a highly regarded teacher who would lay down red carpet in her classroom so when her students entered, they would get the red carpet treatment. Friends and church members said there is no way Joann would have traveled by herself, that she needed assistance when traveling to places she wasn't familiar with, and also did not think she would join a religious commune. The only person who seemed to think this was her husband, James. The private investigator had an assistant working with him and said they were surveilling James and said that he switched cars often when he thought they were tailing him. He would use his girlfriend's daughter's cars. It was also revealed that it was not the police who found Joann's car in the mall parking lot, that it was James, and he had called the police to report that he had found the vehicle. Apparently, James picked up the vehicle, drove it home, washed it, and vacuumed it. March 9th, 1987. James was seeking a divorce from Joann. A summons to appear was issued for Joann, and if she didn't appear within 30 days, the marriage would be dissolved. No idea where they served that summons. May 3rd, 1987, Joann's mother passed away, never knowing what happened to her daughter. November 4th, 2002, a story about Joann Nichols ran in the paper. There was no new information, and it was still unsolved. December 2003, Joann's story ran for 2 days in the paper, still recounted the details surrounding her disappearance, with nothing new to add. July of 2011, Joann's story ran in the paper for 2 days, just like it had in December of 2003. All the details were recounted with nothing new to add. December 27, 2012. Police went to James Nichols' home to do a welfare check after neighbors reported they hadn't seen him in days. They discovered James slumped over in a chair. He died of natural causes. He was 82 years old. The home was described as having garbage and other items from floor to ceiling all throughout the house. James had become a hoarder of everything from antiques to magazines. June 28, 2013. A contractor who was cleaning out the condemned home of James Nichols discovered a false wall in the basement. He pulled out a large, sealed plastic container and found skeletal remains. This is the actual basement. July 1st, 2013. Dental records proved the remains were those of Joann Nichols. Her body had been wrapped in a sheet and inside a large garbage bag and was bound with rope. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. After James died and body was discovered, neighbors and people who knew him started speaking out that they had long suspected he had done something to Joann. They talked about how odd he was. He was gruff and racist. Neighbors would see him sitting in his car reading the paper or sitting in the yard staring off into space. He was seen driving his car with a mannequin in the passenger seat wearing a hat. Others said he drove a lawnmower around the neighborhood. He did still attend church after Joann's disappearance, then stopped going in 2008. A lot of members found his behavior to be off-putting. Some of the cops who were still alive who worked the case long suspected him too, but they didn't have proof, no body, nothing to indicate Joann was dead. One investigator said he would drive by the house at least 3 times a week for the longest time and wonder if Joann was in there. Oh, and remember how James claimed he gave his wife half her check and didn't know what she did with it? A friend of Joann said Joann gave James her whole check, and at the time of her disappearance, there were 2 uncashed checks. I find it fascinating that James' body was found on December 27th, no telling how long he had been dead, but on Find a Grave, they have it listed as December 21st, 2012. December 21st, the day back in 1985 when James reported Joann missing. It would be karma if he did actually die on that same day, and I hope he was haunted in that house. I am sure it was infested with rodents, but maybe that didn't bother him since he kept a dead cat in the freezer. I wanted to make sure I had the right house before I added the photos in this video, and sure enough, this is the house. It was listed for sale in August of 2014 for $200,900. Remember, the contractor started cleaning it out in June of 2013, and James had died 6 months before that in December of 2012. The reason it took so many months to get somebody in there to start cleaning out the house was because most contractors want money up front, and since no one had claimed James' body, and he only had 2 elderly relatives who were still living, there was nobody to pay the bill. The house was being considered for demolition. However, even though the house was disgusting inside, structurally it was sound. The town of Poughkeepsie plan was to sell the house and pay the contractor who cleaned out the house with some of the money and also pay for James' burial expenses. I hope whoever cleaned all those trees and overgrown weeds and bushes was also well compensated. So even still, I had a hard time believing it was the same house, but according to the listing, it was built in 1947, and in order to claim that as the year built, it would have to have some structure remaining of the original house. But it was indeed the whole house. It took 14 months to get the house ready to list. It sat at the price tag of $2,900 until January of 2015. It ended up selling for $185,500. It hasn't sold since, so whoever bought it is still living there in 2024. The crime scene photos show only parts of the house. The whole house cannot be seen full on because of all the overgrowth. This is what you saw from the street back then. I focused hard on this house because it just didn't seem like it was the one, but the stone chimney gave it away. Here you can see the chimney and some of the right side of the house in the crime scene photos. I was able to get almost the same angle, and the chimney and the windows line up. Here is the side by side. The side of the garage where the danger sign was posted in the window is indeed the same. Two windows, although one is covered by a tree branch in the crime scene photo. You can see the smaller vent above the second window. You can see it here too. Here is the side-by-side view. The shape of the garage and the slope of the roof is the same. Another view of the front of the garage without the obstruction of the dumpster. Same view in this photo. Here they are, side by side. Here again is the basement, obviously after it was cleaned out. It was pictured in the 2014 listing. This is what the house looks like in 2024. As far as Joann, she was born in Shreveport, Louisiana. She did aspire to become an actress, but didn't seem practical. She attended Louisiana State University, where she graduated in 1955 with a degree in education. She got her first teaching job in Mississippi, and that is where she met James. In New York, she taught in the Wappinger School District for 22 years. Many of her students still remembered her after all those years. Her students adored her, and she said she made it fun to learn. Joann was described as being mild-mannered. She didn't let a lot bother her. She was very social, cheerful, and upbeat. She was very distraught over the death of her son, but it was normal grieving. She had not been so depressed that she would take her own life. She was very religious. She still spoke with her Louisiana accent, even though she had moved to New York in 1963 when James got a job with IBM. Even though it had been 28 years since her death, many still remembered her fondly. I hope she is resting in peace. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.